everyone, Jay back again with another episode. This is going to be a little bit of a different intro to the episode. This is Jay from the future. So this episode was actually recorded a couple days ago. I wanted to jump in and add this at the beginning because we had to delay this episode a little bit. And the reason for that, I'll get to in a minute. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for that. We're usually trying to get episodes out on Mondays, sometime on Mondays, preferably earlier on Monday during the day, so you guys can listen to it or watch it on your day off or your lunch break or while you're at work, whatever you can do. We've changed our name. We are no longer the Cinephiles podcast. We have changed our name to the Stranded J podcast. And the reason we've done that is for many reasons. First off, what is Stranded J? That's me. If you find me on Twitter at Stranded J, that's my personal Twitter account. And that's going to be basically my name on all kinds of socials. So like I have my own YouTube channel with Stranded J from years ago, things like that. I really just wanted to change it because, well, one, there's already a Cinephiles podcast out there, and they are doing great, and they have a great following, and I didn't, one, want to act like I'm competing with them, and two, I didn't want people to get confused when they search for us, right? Like, it's hard to find us. If you search the Cinephiles podcast, you'll find two. You know, Trish and I kind of thought about it since the beginning. We love the name the Cinephiles podcast, and we're still Cinephiles here. And the podcast is not going to change content. We're definitely not going to change our direction we're going in. We're not going to change anything about us. It does leave a little bit open for us to be a little more broad with our discussions when it comes to movies, video games, comic books, TV shows, you name it. However, we're focusing primarily on movies still, and that's been the goal from day one. We just changed it because we felt that was one of the main reasons we needed to get this moved over before we continued. And so we took some time. Everything's been changed over. So if you go to any of our pages, it's all going to be the Stranded J podcast. So do not be confused if it doesn't say Cinephiles podcast anymore. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up, and I wanted to thank you so much for the support so far. We have some amazing things coming up. I cannot wait to show you. We have some guests that I'm really excited to speak with that I think you guys will be really interested in as well. But yeah, we just thought this was one of the things that we wanted to change. And before we go down this path for too long, we didn't want to get stuck. So welcome to the Stranded J podcast. I hope you enjoy it. The Stranded J podcast. So for this episode, I thought what I would do is I would talk to you guys about a couple random things here and there, all of them pertaining to movies. I have a review of a video game that pertains to a movie, and then we're also going to get into some news. There's a lot of news that happened over the past few weeks, and I wanted to talk about it, and so I thought we'd kind of do a hodgepodge of just movie discussion. Stick around. We're going to do the video game review last, so stick around. We're going to be reviewing Indiana Jones and The Great Circle, which just released on Xbox recently. So we're going to talk about that. First thing I wanted to kind of group into and talk about is the Batman. And the Batman, the reason I want to talk about it is because we have been waiting a long time for the Batman 2. The Batman, what year did that release? Was it 2019? I think it was 2019. No, it wasn't 2019. It was 2021 or 2020. It was 2022, I think. Trying to think off the top of my head. I probably should have wrote it down. But we've been waiting a while for this movie. And it has been slated to be coming out sometime next year. Or like late 2025, 2026, somewhere in there. It has now been delayed a year. So it's supposed to come out in 2026, and it's now delayed to 2027. It's due to the fact that, from what they're saying, Matt Reeves isn't done with the script, because he not only directs it, but he also writes the scripts. And apparently he's still kind of focusing on that. And James Gunn says that, it's not done, so we have to delay it, and he's not upset by it, but he's like, we got to make sure it's right before we're ready. There are some rumors, though, that have been kind of spreading when it comes to who could be the villains. And for a while, we thought maybe it'd be Clayface, because they may use like they don't know which one they were going to use. If it was going to be, you have Basil Carlo, who is kind of the version that is, he doesn't fully turn into a big clay monster. He like just changes his face so he can get around his disguises. He's kind of like the chameleon in the Spider-Man series. And there have been some rumors of some other ones, but a big one that is still being rumored is Mr. Freeze. And Mr. Freeze has only appeared in live action one time for the movies, and that was Arnold Schwarzenegger in Batman and Robin, and it wasn't the best interpretation. So I wonder how they'll do that. I think he is a character they do need to try to bring back and get correct, because I think he's one of the best characters, one of the best villains for Batman as well. If you haven't seen it, the Batman animated series episode Heart of Ice, that was the episode that won an Emmy, and it was, considered one of the greatest animated things ever for the longest time. So if you're ever interested in where to start with a Mr. Freeze story, I would say Heart of Ice from Batman the Animated Series. So my opinions on the Batman being delayed. It's weird. So I really liked the Batman, the first one. I really enjoyed it. And as time's gone on, I will say when I first talked about it, I thought it was neck and neck with The Dark Knight. They were good for very different reasons. I think the Batman has a lot more style to it. I think it's a lot more accurate to Batman being a detective. I think a lot of the aspects of Gotham make more sense, and I think it looks more like the comic book than The Dark Knight. As I think about it, it's hard. I go back and forth now. I don't know if I'm neck and neck with those two anymore. I still think I like The Dark Knight a little bit more, but it depends on the day. Sometimes I'll sit there and I'll go, man, I love the Batman. I think it's so much better than The Dark Knight. And then other times I think of The Dark Knight and I'm like, man, they do so many different things in both that it's hard for me to pick. And so, I was always excited for a sequel, but I got to also admit the Batman came out in a time where DC was really didn't know what to do. They weren't sure what to do with themselves. They weren't quite sure if they wanted to kind of rebuild the universe, if they wanted this to be its own universe, and they still kind of haven't decided on that yet. But it was just something that felt very definitive, and it was very director driven, and it had its own style, and that felt really good because it didn't feel like it had a ton of producer intake on it, and it didn't affect the movie too much, which a lot of the other DC movies had been doing at the time. And so it was a breath of fresh air for that. But now that we're kind of in this, post the Batman, we've had, the hiring of James Gunn, the launching of the DCU and DC Studios and all of these things. It's hard for me to go, because James Gunn wants it as an Elseworlds, meaning if you don't know what Elseworlds are, it was kind of a reference to the comic books back in the day where they had Elseworlds stories. They had an Elseworlds label, and it kind of just told random stories of what ifs, essentially. It's like what if with Marvel, where what if Batman was in the 1800s and was a cowboy? What if there's a great one called Speeding Bullets? What if Superman landed in Gotham and kind of went through what Batman went through, and he dresses like Batman and things? It's crazy. A lot of it's really good, and a lot of it's kind of way out there. But James Gunn just wants to consider all of these things as Elseworlds if they're not in the DCU, so he can encourage, all of these great, awesome ideas from all these different directors who want to, play in the sandbox. And that's great. But, it's hard when we're now in this place where we haven't had much from DC Studios yet. We haven't had much of this DC universe that James Gunn's building, and we still have the Batman that we want. There's a lot of people who want to see it, as a its own thing still. A lot of people want to see him become the Batman in the universe for the DCU with David Corenswet. We don't know what's going to happen yet. As of right now, it's its own universe, which I'm okay with. But I'm just, I'm so excited for so many other things now, not just Superman, but Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And so it's hard for me to be super oh, I'm in a hurry to see it. I know there's a lot of people who love that universe and they love that take, and they want to see it as soon as possible. And I get it. And that's totally fine. But for me, I'm kind of there's so much else to look forward to. Back when the first one came out, I don't know. That was all that we could kind of grasp onto because everything was so tumultuous for the universe. So now that we have, more, I don't know. I'm excited, but if they need to take more time with it, that's totally fine. Next up on the news, we have Christopher Nolan back, just out of Oppenheimer, which was the biggest movie ever and won all of the Oscars. We were just talking about Christopher Nolan with the Batman movies. Well, now it looks like he's going Greek. He's going to be doing The Odyssey is the rumored movie he's going to be working on, a take on The Odyssey. There's rumors that Robert Downey Jr. is going to have a part. They're looking at Tom Holland. They're looking to bring back, a lot of his actors he usually brings back for his movies, but we're going to see some version of The Odyssey, which, it's Christopher Nolan. If he wants to do an adaptation of Barney, I'm probably going to go see it because he seems to, whether or not the story's great or not, he just does a really good job at making good film, and it's really pretty to watch and all of that. But the Odyssey's great. It's really in depth, and I'm sure he'll take it very seriously. So I'm very interested to see how that turns out. Next up, we're going to kind of change gears. I just saw this also. Jake Lloyd, who played young Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Phantom Menace. He's also in one of my favorite Christmas movies, Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's the son in that. Jake Lloyd is finally feeling good, quote unquote, after an 18-month rehab for schizophrenia. This is one of those sad Hollywood stories that everyone's kind of talked about for decades at this point, where Jake Lloyd, was kind of the biggest thing ever for a while because of Star Wars, playing young Anakin, and then he kind of had he got some great roles around that too, around that age. And after that movie, he got bullied pretty badly. He went back to school, and people made a lot of fun of him, and he started to struggle with a lot of things. You see some really awkward interviews with him as he got older at cons and things when he was like in his early 20s. And then, there was a report that he got arrested. He had a mugshot, and I don't remember what it was. He was fleeing from officers for something. And they found out he has apparently schizophrenia. And so it was really sad because he really hated Star Wars. He really resented Star Wars. And he was really an angry person for a while. And now they're saying he is feeling better. And he's been interviewed a few times. He's gone back to cons, and he's been able to kind of figure himself out a little bit. And that's great. And he's now saying he's getting back into Star Wars. He just played The Force Unleashed. And he's looking to maybe watch some of the sequel trilogy and some of the stuff that Disney's been doing to kind of get back into the Star Wars stuff. So it's good for Jake. I'm really glad to see that he's doing better, because that was, like I said, a really sad story for the longest time. And people made fun of him because, there's a lot of criticism behind The Phantom Menace and the prequels and all that. But as time's gone on, it has its own kind of group of fans that grew up with those movies. My opinion is I don't love the prequels like a lot of people. I love the original trilogy, and the sequels I liked more than the prequels, which a lot of people disagree with. And now that I've gotten older, I would say I don't hate them as much as I used to. I think they have their own merits, and I see why people like those movies. And on a nostalgia aspect, I can't argue with that. There's a lot of movies I like based off of nostalgia alone. So, if you're a kid and that's what got you into Star Wars, by all means. But nevertheless, I'm really happy for Jake Lloyd. If this is all true, I'm glad he's doing better. Moving back over to DC, we just got an Instagram post from Jason Momoa just a couple days ago announcing he's going to be playing Lobo in the DCEU. People go, well, wait a minute, wasn't he Aquaman? Well, he was Aquaman. He was cast by Zack Snyder all those years ago, and he's been in a couple movies. The Aquaman movies have been pretty successful, especially the first one, which made over $1 billion worldwide. And he has been, a big fan of the Lobo character, which if you guys don't know who Lobo is, he's a DC character from the 80s and 90s, I think the 90s mostly, but he is kind of like a space biker is the best I can explain it. He's like a bad boy, kind of anti-hero, sometimes a villain. He basically rides on a space motorcycle around space, and is like a bounty hunter, and he swears, and he's kind of like, he looks like how you would, think of Jason Momoa. That's basically what he looks like, except for he has like super white skin and red eyes and kind of Kiss looking features. And he's a great character. If he's written right, he's a super funny character, but he's also like very interesting. He was just recently in the, I think it was Action Comics, if I'm not mistaken. It was either Action Comics or Superman. Just this last arc I read that just recently came out, he was in it. So Jason Momoa has been kind of pushing for that for a few years, and he was excited about something a few years back, right when James Gunn was announced to be kind of leading all this, and he seemed like really excited about something, but he couldn't announce it. Well, he basically just announced it, and James Gunn confirmed it on his Instagram as well with a picture of Lobo. We'll be seeing Lobo in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which is coming out in next year in 2026. And I can't wait to see how he is utilized in that story, because if I'm not mistaken, I do not think Lobo is in that story. So we'll see what they use him for. But, I like Jason Momoa as Aquaman. I thought that was an interesting take. He obviously didn't look like the comic book version, but I love the kind of culture side they added to it, since, He did like grow up in Hawaii. He was born in Iowa and raised in Iowa, which is where I'm from. And so I feel very proud of that. But like he's Polynesian and he's seems like a really gung-ho guy with all that as well. And so it fit really well with the Aquaman story. But I'm interested to see what he does with Lobo, because it definitely seems like he has a little bit more of like a heart passion for that character. So I can't wait to see what happens there. And we'll talk about that more as we hear more about it, right? Tying into our next segment when we're going to be reviewing Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, just wanted to make an announcement for anybody who's living in America and you have Disney Plus. All of the Indiana Jones movies are now on Disney Plus again. I don't know why they left, considering Disney now owns Indiana Jones and Lucasfilm. It's kind of insane to me that he kind of jumped around to all these, his movies jumped all over. They're all on Disney Plus now, so look forward to that. Kind of move fast through all that news. Didn't want to bore you guys too much with it. I just had some interesting segments that I thought I wanted to kind of talk about, because we had a lot of news and there's a lot of casting things, and we had a lot of interesting things going on with the Batman and in the DC universe and things like that. So thought I'd talk about that a little bit. Now we're going to move on into another franchise that I absolutely love. And like I said, that's Indiana Jones. I think I'm going to do like its separate episode talking like in depth about the Indiana Jones movies, because they're very important to me. I've gone back and forth in my life, especially recently, and I've thought to myself, I think I like Indiana Jones more than Star Wars. And that's like blasphemous for a lot of people, but like for me, it just kind of is what it is. I love those movies, and especially the original trilogy. If I wanted to rate them like quickly, I would probably say it was Raiders, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, and then the last two, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and the Dial of Destiny. Those ones are kind of back and forth for me, kind of like with the Star Wars movies and things, but and with the Batman that I was just talking about. I originally liked the Dial of Destiny more than I liked Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And then after I kind of talked to people about it and they kind of gave their points, it kind of has shifted a little. I can't say for sure if I like one better than the other. I think they're both like, you have the original trilogy and then like way down below you have the other two. And I'm not saying they're bad movies. I still actually really enjoy watching both of those, but they definitely don't hit the same as they do as the original three did. And I think that they had a perfect ending with Last Crusade, and if you wanted another even more definitive perfect ending, then you had Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And then they're like, let's do another one. And then they had another ending. So if you like a happier ending, if you like a more ambiguous ending, if you like a darker ending, you kind of can choose based off of those movies. But Raiders, I think, is far and away the best. And a lot of people disagree with that. A lot of people say they like Last Crusade more. I actually like Temple of Doom more than I like Last Crusade. I think Last Crusade's a great movie and I love that one. But Temple of Doom was like the perfect response as a sequel, I think, in my eyes, because it was just a completely different feel. And it was still Indiana Jones and he still was the same character, and it still had a lot of like soaring moments in it that Steven Spielberg will give you, but it was just like, you liked Raiders? Well, here's the same character from Raiders. Let's put him in a completely different atmosphere. And I loved that. And so, that's how I feel about Temple of Doom, but Raiders is easily my favorite. And I think it's the one that holds up the best. I think it's the best written, the best shot, the best acted. I think it has the best story. We've had Indiana Jones video games in the past. I haven't played all of them. We've had some point and click adventures. A lot of people say they like Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which I've played a little bit of. It's like a kind of point and click and kind of choose your adventure and pick things, and I've toyed around with it. The one that I played all the time when I was a kid was the Super Nintendo Indiana Jones Adventures. I don't remember what it was specifically called, but it had like a kind of a, you go through the trilogy, like the best moments of the trilogy, and it's like a side scroller. And it was pretty hard, but I did enjoy that one. But I've always been kind of waiting for a good Indiana Jones game, like, because I'm a big gamer myself, and I've always thought that was like a prime franchise to get into like a really good video game. And then they made the Uncharted games for PlayStation, and Uncharted is essentially Indiana Jones. Like it has all of the big action set pieces. It has all of the crazy over the top violence. It has not in like a gory way, but just like the Indiana Jones way, which it has a little bit of gore, but it also has a little bit of that, like, it's campy enough that you can tell it's just not real. And all of those games are like some of my favorite video games of all time. All four of, I've only played the core games, but 1, 2, 3, and 4 are like amazing. And I play them, replay them all the time. I play 4 all the time. 2 is considered the best, but that was basically Indiana Jones. It was third person, and you got to go around and shoot, and then you did puzzles, and you did a lot of like climbing and platforming. So I kind of thought to myself, like, maybe Indiana Jones is past his prime in a video game. Like maybe, they've already kind of solved that and scratched that itch. And now they can't really make an Indiana Jones game anymore. And then they announced they're making this one, and it was in first person. And I was like, whoa, that I don't know if I can deal with that. Like, that's weird. I don't know. Like, if I'm going to do an Indiana Jones game, I hope it's like like an Uncharted, but then it'd just kind of be an Uncharted game with an Indiana Jones skin on it. So how are they going to do this? Well, they just released this, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Right now, it's only for Xbox. It's a timed exclusive, so you can only play it for Xbox. But it should be coming out on PlayStation in the near future, and it's on PC as well. Published by Bethesda. They're one of my favorite studios. A lot of people don't like them anymore because of age, but they've done the Fallout series. They did Elder Scrolls. That's their biggest one. So Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, all of those. They just recently released Starfield, the very polarizing Starfield. So I've been playing their games for a very, very long time, and they didn't really make this game. They just published it. The creators were Machine Games. Machine Games is owned by Bethesda. Bethesda was owned by Xbox, and that's why it's an exclusive right now. But Machine Games did the Wolfenstein remakes, which I also really, really liked. Wolfenstein The New Order and Wolfenstein The New Colossus. Those are the only 2 I've played. I liked the first one better than the second one, but it was like a Doom. It felt very much like Doom, which was also created by id. It's a whole long thing, but basically Wolfenstein is great. It's like a super hyper fantasy Nazi killing alternate history game, first person shooter. And I thought that they started way back in the day with like really rudimentary 80s, like before Doom, and then they remade it a couple times, and Machine Games took it over, and essentially they made a couple more games, and they've been really fun and great graphics and a pretty good story. I thought they remade those and had its own kind of version. And I think they did that really well. But now they're working on Indiana Jones. I was excited for it. Even though I was like, kind of like, I don't know, man, first person, like, how are they going to do this? And like, do we need an Indiana Jones game? Off the cuff, I just have to say, story wise, this game has a better story than at least the newest 2 Indiana Jones movies. If not, I think I like it more than Last Crusade out of my ratings. And don't come after me for that. Like, if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. But this game blew my mind with its story. I thought it hit the feel better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny. And I thought it was on par, at least, with the original trilogy. The voice of Indy is Troy Baker, who is a voice actor who's been around forever. He kind of does everything now. If you've heard someone talk at a video game, you've heard Troy Baker. His biggest claim to fame is probably Joel from The Last of Us. In the video game series The Last of Us, he sounds very different in that. He's done the Joker before. He did it in Batman Arkham Origins. I think he's done it in a few other things. And he does Indy in this, and he sounds almost exactly like Harrison Ford. I mean, it is like impressive how close it is. And the reason I say that is because the first, like kind of the tutorial of this game is a flashback to the opening of Raiders, where you're going for the golden idol and you have the big boulder chasing you and everything. You play that sequence, and they have cutscenes. And in the cutscenes, they basically, it's shot for shot, exactly like the movie, just with, their video game versions, and they have the video game actors doing the voices. And he sounds so good as Indiana Jones. I mean, I feel like they could make 1 million of these games, and you could have Troy Baker do it, and it would be like having Harrison Ford forever. Or you could do an animated series or something. Harrison Ford gave his blessing. I watched the Video Game Awards that were out in early December, and they came on stage. Todd Howard, who's like the big executive over at Bethesda and creative director, and Troy Baker, and then Harrison Ford came out and he was like praising them. And I know Harrison Ford's a very like crotchety old man, but like he seemed pretty impressed with Troy Baker's voice, just like everybody else seems to be. This takes place in between Raiders and The Last Crusade. Now, for people who don't know, Temple of Doom takes place before Raiders. So timeline-wise, when you watch the movies, it's supposed to be technically Temple of Doom, Raiders, Last Crusade, and then you get into like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny. They just released them in different orders because they had a story that just took place earlier. So this takes place. So Temple of Doom's happened and Raiders has happened, and they do reference those movies, which is awesome too. A lot of Easter eggs in this game, a lot of things that call back to the original movies. And he even talks about his dad, which is funny because it's before the Last Crusade happens, but like he talks about Henry Jones Sr. The story is brand new. It's nothing that has to do with anything we've seen so far. The only thing it has a tie into is a biblical sense. And besides like Temple of Doom, and I you can't really say that anymore. In the original trilogy, besides Temple of Doom, it was all kind of like a religious background. He's looking for the Holy Grail. In Last Crusade, he's looking for the Ark of the Covenant. In Raiders of the Lost Ark. And in this one, I don't want to spoil anything, so don't worry. If you haven't played the game and you're looking to, I won't spoil what it's about, because the reveal at the end of this game is so cool. But the Great Circle is the title, the subtitle. The Great Circle is essentially a bunch of rocks that are found all throughout the world, and it's this simple idea that there is a great circle around the globe that all of them are in certain continents and countries, and put together something happens. They don't know what happens, but you put these, they're all lined up perfectly around, and when you grab them and you put them together, it makes something happen, right? Well, you play the game to figure out, you chase these stones. And the fun thing about this game too is, some of these recent Indiana Jones movies have been taking place in the future because, Harrison Ford's old. And so he is, usually fighting like Russians or something like that. You're back to fighting Nazis in this, Nazis and fascists, and you jump all around the globe. So that's fun to go back into that era. And, if you're not punching a Nazi in an Indiana Jones game, you kind of feel like you're missing out. Without spoiling anything, essentially the game's kind of set up with, you got the tutorial level, kind of the prologue, which is him dreaming about what happened in Raiders at the beginning. And then you start out in the college. That's the first level. And they're all kind of linear. So you kind of go back and forth between like a linear level that, you really just kind of follow the path to get to the next part of the story. And then you end up on a different part of the globe that you have a little bit more room to explore. And so this game has a lot of side quests in it. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of like upgrades when it comes to like finding books that help you fight or help you do what you need with that. But then there's also like pictures, like you get a camera, you take pictures of certain areas, you get points that you can use to upgrade your indie, essentially. The first one I'll say is the Vatican. And you go to the Vatican and you have basically this massive section that you can look around in, and you can find all kinds of fun things that you can do, and it leads you into other quests and other discoveries and relics and things that you find. And they go back and forth between being kind of open and then kind of linear to progress the story, and then open and linear. And there's maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they take you all over. So if you're looking for Indiana Jones in a desert, you got him. You're looking for Indiana Jones in a city, you got him. You're looking for Indiana Jones in a tundra, you got him. Like jungle, all that. Like you get all of the classic areas you'd like to see that character in. And when it comes to gameplay, I was very impressed because it's first person, but it's such a cliche thing to say nowadays because they seem to use it all the time in reviews for video games, but you do feel like Indiana Jones. Essentially, you use your fists. You can pick up items, so you can pick up like a bottle and throw it to distract people. You can pick up a bottle and smash it behind a Nazi's head and knock him out in one hit. You can take, sometimes you pick up like melee weapons, so clubs, hammers, sickles, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. And they're used for various things. You can go around the world and you can find boxes, lock boxes, and you can break the lock with them. And grab money, or you can go behind, like I said, go behind people and bash them. You can fight them melee. Sometimes you got to break down a hidden wall somewhere to finish a puzzle. So you do use melee weapons, but they're very, like, the durability is really low, so they'll break really fast after like 2 hits because they want you to fight like Indiana Jones. And the sound they got is exactly like the sound from the movies when you punch people, just that perfect Indiana Jones punch sound. And the combat is actually pretty in depth. You know, you have both your fists for each trigger, and then you have the left bumper to kind of block, and you block based off of, you always block the same way, but based off of what fist they threw, you got to swing with the opposite to punch them. Otherwise you just kind of push them away. You can also push people, which is fun because I've gone around and like, there's a guy looking down a big pit. You can just push him into it, stuff like that. Really fun. There are guns. So, kind of going back, a big thing they do in this game that adds an extra gameplay element to it is they have disguises. So Indy, not a lot of people think about that. I didn't, at least, that like in the Indy movies, he's not always in his leather jacket and hat. Like he's sometimes, the professor, and then sometimes he's like disguised as a Nazi, or he's just in Raiders, he gets into like his desert outfit when he goes to find the staff and find out where the Ark is and all that. They kind of utilize that in this game. I was about to say movie. They utilize that in this game, and so in each level, pretty much you get a different disguise. When you go around, you have, like, say you go in as a Nazi, then you don't have guys that are like all up in your business trying to fight you every 10 seconds, and you can kind of go discover things at their camps and things. But then they have kind of head honchos that are walking around, and if you see them, they're dressed very specifically, they will instantly recognize you and they will like go after you. So you have to kind of avoid still, even though you have these. But each disguise kind of has its special weapon, essentially. So for regular Indy, he has his revolver, and you basically select it and you can shoot people and stuff. And then like one disguise, you have a shovel, and like you can pull it out anytime. You don't have to pick it up. And it also breaks, but you can find repair kits to re-repair it and use it again. And that's kind of a cool concept to be like kind of undercover a lot of times, because it's like, you can't always be leather jacket wearing Indiana Jones walking around in the middle of a Nazi camp and they just like think you're fine. So that's a way to get around that, which is kind of fun. And I never really thought about that in the movies, but they did do it. And so it fits. But there's some other weapons you can pick up too. Like there are rifles and machine guns and things. It's just once you pick them up and you can use them, they only have so many bullets, and then you run out. It's kind of fun because you can turn it into a melee weapon and like throw it at a guy, or you can hit them with it like a club, but they eventually will break too. And when you run out of ammo, you can't pick up any more, only for the revolver. So once you're out, you got to kind of toss it, and you can't really carry it around with you the whole game because you'll drop it as soon as you need to climb a rope or something. But the other thing that you use a lot is obviously his bullwhip, which that is a kind of a like, besides his fist, the biggest thing you use in the game. You use it a lot of times to swing across things. You use it a lot to pull yourself up at higher places. You use it a lot to kind of pull like little rings and stuff to knock stuff down. But then you can also use it in fighting. So you can whip a guy and pull his gun out of his hand so he doesn't shoot you. You can pull him closer to you. You can upgrade it and do a lot of other stuff. But you can also, my favorite thing is not only can you pull a guy closer to you or anything, you can actually grab a guy. And it's the funniest looking thing because it looks so legit as an Indiana Jones fan to like see, like in first person, you just grab like a Nazi by his collar and just start just punching him, and then just like knocking him out and like pushing him. You can pick up bodies and hide them so people can't find them and stuff. It's really fun. But so the gameplay is like amazing, and like there's platforming. You do a lot of climbing and things. The puzzles are actually great. One of the biggest compliments I can give this game is I hate puzzles in games a lot of times, even though most games have them, because they're either so hard that you just give up and look up how to do it. Maybe it's me. Or they're so easy, they feel like filler just to keep the game longer. These are like the perfect balance between like, you had to use your brain. But I'm proud to say every single puzzle I've run into so far in this game, which I haven't 100%ed, I've beaten the story and I've done most of the stuff, but there's some stuff I still haven't finished. All of these random, like there's different codes that you got to use. There's different, like you'll pick up letters all over the place and they'll have like hints towards how you can open a safe. They'll be like, here's a code. It's based off of this date, but this date is off because this guy was off that day. So you got to go a day behind. Like, there's a lot of really like, it doesn't take me all day to like sit there and get frustrated with it and have to figure it out. But it also is like, takes me a minute to have to think, and you feel it's really rewarding once you finish it. So a big compliment to the game for its puzzles. And they do have hints that you can do, and I've never had to use them, but you essentially use your camera and take a picture of the puzzle, and it'll kind of give you more hints on how to do it. There's some that took me longer than other puzzles, but like none of them I never got fully stuck. It has all the Indiana Jones tropes, like all the classic tropes. You have kind of the head honcho Nazi who you're following. You have the muscle. You have, he has another love interest in this, and she's great. Her name's Gina, and she's a reporter, and like, she's super cool, and she's fun to be around. You're not around her all the time. You're not attached at the hip, but she's a perfect like person to have like in certain parts of the game with you. And like, the relationship between them and the chemistry between Indy and her are like just out of the movies where, you know, he has his woman partner that he, you know, kind of falls for, and vice versa. And she's great. Tony Todd, who just recently passed away, he plays a big part in this game. So this is probably one of his last appearances. I highly recommend it. It was really fun, and I can't wait. I actually like want to just like play through it again because it wasn't super overly long. You can get through the story in a matter of, you know, a relatively normal video game length. But then there's so much you can do on the outside of it. And I was so surprised that like when I felt like it was wrapping up and I was like, oh, we're probably getting to the end of it, there was a whole other level that I got to. And I'm like, oh, awesome. And like, or there's a new element they add to it. One kind of minor spoiler is you get to one area where like closer to the end of the game where you get a boat that you can like take around the area and like find different things. And so all that's like really fun. It really like the writing was very solid, and they put a lot of effort into it. And that's the scary thing about making an Indiana Jones video game, is the fact that you have to like, you know, you got to make it seem as much like one of the movies as possible. Otherwise people can tell if it's a phony, and then it feels like just a cheap knockoff of an Indiana Jones thing. And this was not. This was like very accurate. A lot of cool references, had just the right amount of fantasy mixed in with like this could never happen, but like you can just stretch your disbelief enough, like in any other Indiana Jones thing, that like it feels good. And like I said, the payoff, I don't want to spoil the payoff for you. You learn about the Great Circle, you know what the Great Circle does, and you go, oh, okay, so that's what's going to happen. Well, then once you figure out, you know, kind of the MacGuffin of it all, you go, well, now they're just basically got to, you know, do this, and then it leads to this, and it's over. Well, you predict it all the way up to the last level, and then there is another big part of the story that ties in with a lot of Indiana Jones stories that you go, oh, that's so cool. Like, they actually did that. Like, that's cool. They are saying the game didn't really sell very well. Indiana Jones it's sad because for a lot of people, he's kind of an older property. And because Harrison Ford's older and they've done a lot of him as an older man in the movies, the younger generation doesn't, I think, appreciate it as much. And I'm saying that as someone who's relatively young. The only movie I could have seen in theaters was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That was the oldest one. But it's sad because they're saying it's not doing too well. I think that's partially Xbox being how they are. They have Game Pass, which you don't really have to buy the game. You can just kind of rent it or have a subscription and play it. And it kind of mumbles the sales, and it makes people not commit to a game if they don't, you know, if they start it and they don't really finish it, things like that. But I hope it does well enough that they make another one. Because like I said, you could make multiple of these. Like, you can just do the same exact formula, just different story. As long as they put effort into that, like, I'm there. Like, it's great. So I highly recommend it. I think if you haven't played it, or if you have any means to play it, like I said, it's on PC as well. Xbox is kind of doing this thing now where they're really about, like, you don't need their console to be able to play their games, which for some people they like. For me, it's kind of weird. But if you don't have an Xbox, there's still ways you can play it. Like, there's even ways you can, if you have a good enough internet connection, you can buy a subscription to Xbox and play it off your TV, off your computer, whatever. And so I highly recommend you guys try it out if you haven't yet. And I am curious to hear what you guys have to say about it, because I could not put it down. I think it's probably in my top 2 or 3 game of the year contenders for me. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Very, very fitting to the lore of Indiana Jones. Like I said, we'll go into detail on the movies some other time and talk to some people about it because I have a lot to say about those movies and they mean a lot to me. So don't want to talk about it here yet, but I had to talk about the game while it's relatively new still. It's only been out for maybe a month. So yeah. So that's going to do it for episode 5. I know it's a bit all over the place. We kind of went over some great news, some bad news, some good news, whatever. And we kind of had, I tried to give my opinions as best as I could. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. So whatever you're listening to this on or watching this on, if you're on YouTube or listening on Spotify, please comment or post on our Facebook page after you've watched the episode and kind of give me your thoughts on some of whether it's the news or whether it's the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game. I'd love to hear your opinion. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.